2020 was an unprecedented year. The COVID-19 global health pandemic created a ripple effect that was felt across several spectrums of life. With the increase in cases and deaths came an increase in business closures, unemployment, food insecurities.
Hundreds of cars lined up this morning to get an emergency food box from the Arkansas Food Bank. Thousands of people have been laid off because of COVID-19.
And also hate crimes against the Asian community.
And when the door opened, he stepped forward and slashed me. Then I put my hand on my face, and then when I look at my hands, there's blood oozing. So I cried for help, and I cried for help, but nobody helped.
Disturbing that really kicked off the social media outrage and the public outrage was the death of 84-year-old Visha Ratanapakdi. He was the Thai man in San Francisco who had just gotten his COVID-19 vaccine, had just celebrated his birthday, a father, a grandfather, walking on.
Today, the Arkansas Martin Luther King Jr. Commission hosts Crucial Community Conversations, our first program highlighting the Asian experience in America. Welcome to this edition of Crucial Community Conversations. I'm your host, Tiffany Pettis, historian for the Arkansas Martin Luther King Jr. Commission, a division of the Arkansas Department of Education. And we'd like to thank our Executive Director, Mr. Deshaun Scarborough, for this opportunity to host another virtual platform with community leaders to talk to you about community issues and everything and things that are happening in the news and current events. We'd like to thank Mr. Scarborough again for this opportunity for his out the state and across several platforms. We'd like to welcome our guest today for this installment of Crucial Community Conversations. Please welcome the Honorable Mayor Joe Dan Yee of Lake Village, Arkansas. Just wait. All right. And also, we're pleased to have our young leaders, Rosa Bost, and also Juliana Grantham joining us for another program. She's helped us out in the past, and we're so great to have you here. Welcome to Crucial Community Conversations. Wonderful. All right, so wonderful. We'll get started with our first question. What has been your experience as an Asian American in this country and state? And this is just for anyone to chime in.
Thanks to the Chinese Exclusion Act, I'm the fourth generation to be born here in the United States and the second to be born here in Arkansas. My grandfather was born in California. And let me just say, growing up, I never had any bad experiences as far as hatred or anything like that because I grew up in a small town. We went to Catholic school with Italian culture. And we were always accepted. You know, I never had any bad experiences. You know, I went to school with the Italians, and then when I got out of school, I went to work at our business, and you had blacks and whites as well, you know, that I mixed with. So I never saw that side of anything. But I noticed when I was 5 years old, my dad took me to the doctor's office and to the dentist's office. And when I walked into the waiting room or the lobby, I saw signs, black and white. And I didn't understand which room I was supposed to go into. And my dad just had to know both the receptionists. He said, son, we can go in here. And I said, Dad, we're not white, but we're not black. He said, come on, son, just come on in here. And I never knew that side because I never envisioned you would have a black and white lobby. You all would go in the same door. You know what I'm saying? That has never even hit me because growing up, we were all friends and now they all accepted us, you know, just like one another. It didn't have nothing to do with race at all, you know. But I noticed that when I was 14 years old and I got my permit, my mother and sister could not wait till I got my permit as we only lived 30 miles from Greenville, Mississippi, where they always did their shopping. And back then, downtown Greenville was owned by all Jewish families. Now, we went in these stores, the Jewish families were just like the Chinese and Italians. They welcome you at, you know, when you walked into the store. You know, I mean, it was just like you were one of them. They never looked at you like you were Chinese. But I noticed I had an experience, bad experience when I was 16. I went to Greenville to this men's clothing store and I walked in, the owner's son-in-law, and the son. They had two customers in there. I walked in, they didn't say, can we help you or anything. I walked straight to looked at the shirts and I stayed there a good 5 to 10 minutes. Just stood there looking, see how they were going to react. Well, two customers coming after that. Hey, how's your golf game? Blah, blah, blah. They never acknowledged me. So after my 15 minutes, I walked out of there. I never went back to that store because I could see the hatred, you know, the racism in Mississippi against Chinese people. And that was the only bad experience I got, you know, when I was 16. Now, I have to say, when I was 19 years old, we had a bunch of us Asians. We went to eat at some restaurant in Little Rock. I forgot the name of it, but it's closed now. But Tiffany, the host sat us down at 6:45. 7:45, not a waiter, nobody even came by our table. Nothing. And we know those people that came after us got waited on, sitting 2 tables below us. And they didn't even not acknowledge us. Now, I was only like 19, and I didn't think nothing about it. But we walked out of that restaurant, the maitre d' there at the table we walked in, did y'all have a problem or anything? Not a word said. Now, if I was older then, I would have made a big issue out of it. Young, I didn't know any better, but if this had happened today, I would have stood up for my rights and said, hey, none of you are better than us in this country. We are born, you know what I'm saying, and the same color, whatever you want to say. I mean, but we're all the same on the inside. There is no difference about, you know, racism, anything. I would bring that up today, Tiffany, big time, because that issue, and I remember it so well that when I think about it today and everything that's going on, it just can't clear my mind. You know, I just can't forget about it. But I was only 19 then, you know, and I didn't know any better. But with everything that's going on today, yes, if that happened to me today in a restaurant in Little Rock, oh yes, I would make sure that I would contact the newspaper, the media, and let them know ASAP.
That's really something, and we really need to hear more stories like that. So thank you so much for bearing your soul and sharing that with us. That's very important. For people who don't understand, what would you all like for them to understand about the Asian community? I know there's a lot of stereotypes, but help us to educate people.
Well, you know, the Asians are, they highly evaluate education and they prioritize their family, especially the elderly. You know, I remember growing up and going to Catholic school, you had to have your report card signed by your parent before you can move further. In other words, if your parent did not sign the report card, you had to stay after school for a week in class with the nuns. We had nuns back then, and they were, woo, I'm gonna tell you, they were tough. You know, anyway, you had to stay an hour after school, and they give you an assignment. If you did not finish that correctly, you stayed until you finished. So that was hell. And I will never forget it. Hey, the first time I had bad grades, my dad signed it. You know, second time, my dad didn't sign it. And I had to stay in class that whole week. And I'm like, I'm not doing this again. You know, I mean, I was just so scared. You know, being that young age and those nuns were so, they had that look in their face, you know. But when I got bad grades again, I let my sister, who could forge my dad's name on it, so I did not have to stay in the school. You know, but I learned right quick that my dad, my mother and daddy from then on, they highly prioritized education. That was the most important thing to the Asian people. And let me tell you something, growing up, my dad and mother did not care what you did. Friday and Saturday nights, you're hanging out with your friends, but Sunday night, you're on that dinner table at 6 o'clock, the whole family.
Rosa and Juliana, did you want to chime in?
Yeah.
Oh, hi, yes. So my name's Rosa Bost. Thank you for having me. I wanted to talk about a study that I got to be a part of. And I did a minority health disparities initiative with the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, a couple of years ago. And we did a study on multi-ethnic racial identity development with a combination of 7 different racial compositions. Racial composition, if you're curious, are, Asian and white, black and white, like Hispanic, et cetera, et cetera. And so one thing that we did was interviewed, it was a large study, and I have the details here in my research, but I'll just give you a brief overview. As we interviewed a number of people that were different ages, backgrounds, different compositions, we wanted to know basically what were the benefits and challenges of being multi-ethnic racial. And so one thing that we found, and I did a study on this, branching from this main study for my master's project, specifically the Asian and white community. And so one thing we found was very similar in the benefits and challenges, and I'll go ahead and tell you the challenges first, and then I'll tell you the benefits. So challenges, and he mentioned some of these things too, and this discrimination or microaggressions, forced choice, lack of role models, belongingness, legitimizing, forced enactment, family difference. If you're you grow up in a, let's say your mom's white, your father's Asian, there's that family difference of that identity there. And then kids, and then benefits that we found were tolerance, shifting identities. So Julie and I are not fully of the Asian community. So we are both half Russian or half white, if you will. And so one of the benefits that we have is shifting identities. And we can go into that a little more later. There's physical features, pluralistic worldviews, pride, pragmatic views, and finally compliments. And one part of the study that I did was, instead of interviewing people, I did a autoethnography, which is essentially an autobiography supported with research. And I wanted to look at my own journey as what were the challenges? What are some key moments in my life that have occurred that have affected my identity as an Asian American in a negative or positive way? And so I looked at, kind of like he said before, on different experiences, like the one where they went to eat and nobody helped them, or when he went into the store. So I have similar experiences, And, there's obviously an age gap between the two of us, but I'm seeing a lot of similarities there. So I grew up in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and I was adopted. I came to Pine Bluff when I was about 5 years old. And I remember to the detail certain things that happened. And I'll just give very brief examples of each experience. So for me, when I remember playing on the playground and meeting new friends, a lot of the kids would come up to me and they would do like pull their eyes, ching chong, and like stick their tongue out at me and be like, "You're weird." And I remember being so upset on the playground, being like, "I'm not different. Like, I'm just a kid. I just want to play on the playground," that kind of thing. And that has stuck with me. And number two, I was adopted, so my family is white. But every Sunday we would go to eat somewhere after church. And one of my favorite places was this Chinese buffet. And I remember being there and I always went for seconds. And when I was going up for I was probably, let's see my age then, I want to say between 8 and 12. I can't remember exactly, but I was young. I was like a preteen. And I was in my church outfit going for seconds when someone very rudely asked me why I wasn't helping them, and basically thought I was working there and they thought I was being rude because I wasn't helping them. And I'm just like a little girl on the line trying to get food. And I felt so uncomfortable about that because as someone who's young, adolescent, trying to find their identity, that just, I didn't realize, because I have a nurturing home and an environment and all of that. And so when I go to these other places and people act that way, it then began my identity thought process of, okay, what am I? What do I look like to other people? And so that really made me aware of my differences and how people perceive those. And then I'll just briefly go on to cheer. I was a cheerleader. I was bullied because of being different. And then I began to, as I went into college, and I also did Arkansas Governor School, which is a pre-college program, and students from all over Arkansas are joined at Hendrix College for a couple of weeks, and you learn. It's just a fun summer thing. And so that began to shift from a negative identity to a positive when I began to think independently and be surrounded by more culture and more diverse students and that sort of thing, and getting information and knowledge on how to understand racism, discrimination, and how to piece together how my own journey to process that and how it's perceived. So that's one thing, that's just a tidbit that I have to add based on my own experiences is, I mean, it's still very apparent. It may not show up as people, as some other racial communities have experienced, but it's still there. It's still very much alive. And the way I guess just for me and Julie might be able to chime in on this, we have learned just to accept people the way they are. We know we're different, but we love that we're different. And it's definitely a negative point of view that's shifted into a positive one as we've grown up into adults and thinking in our own ways. But we try to, because I mean, even day to day, I worked at Dillard's for a long time in the retail community, and all the time I would get asked, "What are you?" Mm-hmm. And probably every other day. And at first I would get very upset. I'm like, oh, here we go. Like, literally, I'm just trying, like, what are you, Asian or something? And it would just be mind-boggling because I'm in college and I'm like, 20 something, and this person's talking to me like I'm looking at like I'm an alien, and that's how my initial perceivement was, where I was like, I would take it offensively, but I've grown into making that more of a positive experience. And so jokingly, I respond now by saying, well, what do you think I am? And then they'll say a series of different racial groups or whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Are you sure? And they're like, oh, is it not? And so it's like a fun game. And then once I figure it out, then I kind of teach them, oh, I'm this, blah, blah, blah. You're wrong. You need to, and I would try to make that a positive experience, not only for myself and my own like personal mental health and well-being as someone who's perceiving that, but to voice to them, hey, the way you asked me, that's not okay. It's great to be curious and to ask people. I mean, there's some beautiful people out there mixed with all kinds of cool stuff. But it's the way people communicate those curiosities that sometimes strikes a nerve or it leads to microaggression. So Julie, you have to chime in on that.
Hi. So Rosa and I are both adopted from Russia. We're about 400, we were born 400 miles apart from each other. She's from Ufa and I'm from Kazakhstan. So we both have a significant amount of Mongolian in us as well. And in my childhood experience, I was bullied a lot, and it's similar to Rosa's, they make fun of the shape of my eyes and the color of my skin. I have some yellow tan tones, but so I never understood that because just like Rosa, I grew up in a very loving, nurturing home. I was adopted by two amazing moms, hey mom, and just always preached and practiced love, acceptance, respect. And it wasn't even, I also went to Catholic school, middle school, probably the worst experience in my life as a child growing up, and experienced a lot of racial slurs, being made fun of, being ostracized for my race. But getting into high school and college, not so much, but more fetishized, sexualized for my race. And that's, I don't know, it's uncomfortable. It's
expecting
awkward
to be good at math.
Oh gosh, yeah. And yeah, so I'm gonna piggyback off of one of Rosa's statements, how she found some benefits. She listed compliments was one of her benefits. We do get complimented a lot. I get complimented a lot, but I also get, oh, you're so exotic, and follow up with something a little crude. And that's been my experience now as far as being a grown-up, or I'm grown, 28 years old. Haven't experienced that quite as much, but definitely high school and college, those were some very uncomfortable times and uncomfortable experiences.
Well, one thing I wanted to say here, there's these researchers, Chavez and Guido de Brito, 1999. So they argue that if positive ethnic group messages and support are not apparent or available to counteract a negative public message, a particular individual is likely to feel shame or disconnection toward their own ethnic identity. And that's one thing that I'm super excited to be a part of this, because we are voicing support and acknowledgement of these racial compositions, and no matter what race you are, just the acceptance and the talk and keeping that conversation. So,
I sure thank you all for coming on and having the courage to bare your soul. And I understand that sometimes those experiences can take us to places, that are difficult to deal with. I really appreciate you all for sharing your experience.
And one more thing.
Yes, sir. Mary Yee, you had a comment?
In my family, I had two nieces that went to the University of Arkansas, probably with a 10-year gap. And it was really funny. Both of my nieces were rooming with American blacks, you know what I'm saying? And not whites, both roommates. And I thought that was quite unusual that that happened like that. You know, they had American blacks for a roommate, both of them. And I thought that was quite unusual, you know what I'm saying, that happened. And so did my family. We didn't know if that was a hatred thing or what. You know, we just didn't know. We felt really, you know, hurt. I mean, my nieces were from California. They didn't care. We didn't care. But it's just kind of odd that both of them would have, you know, roommates. And that my nieces loved it. Don't get me wrong, because they felt like they were welcome with their roommates, and they felt probably felt better with African Americans. I mean, blacks and, you know, Caucasians, because they felt like they were accepted more. You know what I'm saying? It was just really strange.
Mm. With the exception of the rise in violence against the Asian community, what do you feel are the greatest challenges facing the Asian community today?
I think that, well, I think people got to realize that not all Asians are petite. They're all not slant eyes. They're not rich. They're not professionals. You know, they're not studious, exotic, or martial artists. You know, they got to realize, you know, I mean, Tiffany, when I went to China, my first time with my parents in 1985, and I witnessed it firsthand. My sister told me, when you get off that plane, don't feel like you're going to fit in. Because once you get off that plane, they are going to take notice of you right quick. And when I got off that plane, I noticed the clothes we wear, our eyes were not slanted, just everything about us, you know, was just different. And that's what I want to people in this United States to realize. Not all of us are professionals. Not all of us are slant-eyed. I even had some friends coming to me. Are you sure you're Asian? You're Chinese, right? I said, yeah. I said, why? Oh, because all Japanese eyes are slanted. I'm like, what? You know, it just really made me mad.
Mhm.
Well, for them to say that.
When they ask you what you are, and you're like, of course I know what I am.
Yeah.
Right, right.
I think the challenges are discrimination or
Mhm.
stereotypical things, microaggressions.
Mhm.
And microaggression is, you know, like, can you define microaggression?
Isn't it just discrimination against your perceived
Yeah, but it's like almost more
perceptions?
subtle. Like some people think they're joking when they do a microaggression.
Mhm.
When, for example, if you expect that I can cook really good, or
Mhm.
No
I'm
math
good at math,
or nails.
or even like she
Mhm.
said, the sexual fetish, and
Mhm.
and that's the thing is the stereotypes and the microaggressions and that stuff that's any race can attest to is just gonna happen, and it's something that we just have to kind of live with. But I think it's just crucial for someone, as we deal with these challenges. I mean, that's probably never going to change. I mean, it might improve or what have you, but having a support group and friends and family that you feel comfortable sharing things that bother you. Like if something happened and, I feel bad because I am the race that I am, or maybe I feel like I didn't get the job because of my race, or the guy doesn't like me. You know what I mean? These kind of things, even if I feel that way and it's not true, I have friends and family that understand
Mhm.
the value of my culture and who I am and can kind of bring me back to that center of, what you are is okay, and don't sink into the discrimination of people who aren't knowledgeable.
Or ignorant.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Maybe they're
Now,
cultured.
Yeah.
Definitely.
then speaking in terms of the bill that was just passed and it was signed into law yesterday as we speak, the U.S. Senate overwhelmingly passed new legislation aimed at combating rising anti-Asian hate crimes during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the bill will, so we were talking in present tense, but right now it's active, will establish a new Justice Department position to expedite the review of COVID-19 related hate crimes and provide support for law enforcement agencies to respond to anti-Asian hate violence. President Biden is quoted as saying, "This critical legislation will bring our nation one step closer to achieving justice and equality for Asian American, Native, Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities." This is a great step. However, do you feel that it is enough to stop violence and attacks against the Asian community? If not, what more do you feel should be done?
I don't think it's enough personally, but I feel that things that the three of us, have experienced are nowhere measurable to the experiences of some of the other Asian hate crimes, and other races, crimes and discrimination. I mean, these are very micro challenges that we've experienced. I was physically never hurt, or nothing of mine has technically been destroyed. So I can't really speak for those groups of people. I mean, you know, my heart goes out to their families who have experienced very detrimental discrimination. I feel like it's President Biden doing that is a great step in the direction of acknowledging these crimes and discrimination. But I feel like there's going to be a need more to perhaps more practices and inclusion, as far as like maybe, because you asked what more could he do or they do. I feel like inclusion, maybe, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything crazy like a day, like a holiday, or ways to
Spread awareness.
Mhm.
A lot of people, and also there comes that the United States is a melting pot. We're all mixed with something no matter what. I mean, even now more so than a couple other generations ago. So I feel like this is something that it's more of a previous generations witnessing older generations, I say, and correct me if I'm wrong. The younger generations that are that are dating past their race, interracial couples and that sort of thing is becoming extremely common and accepted finally. And there's probably a statistic, one and so whatever, mixed with, you know what I mean? And I think that this is a step forward into people realizing that there's change, and some of them are apt to change. And that's, I feel like personally, that could be a contributing factor to the rise in hate crimes and discrimination, because people are like, no, this is how it's always. But when in reality, things are changing and changing fast based on race and cultures and acceptance. And it may not be enough right now, but it's certainly a good step in direction.
Now, my understanding is that the bill will provide funds to communities and cities to provide outreach projects for understanding, to promote healing and to promote education. Now, with that, are you aware of any local efforts within your cities or communities to promote healing and to bring about understanding?
Tiffany, I have not seen anything of that in my community or surrounding area. I think, and I'm not trying to be ugly, I think being in the Delta you know, it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot.
He's right.
Mhm.
It's going to take a lot of work.
The University of Arkansas at Little Rock, I know from experience, my Department of Applied Communication, where I got my undergraduate and master's degree, the UAOR does some amazing programs and community things to get cultures together and to talk. So universities certainly are a good kind of place to lay the groundwork. Because a lot of students, like I said, will go to school, and that's when you begin to see there's a lot more culture out there than when you were raised in your small town in Arkansas. And so I feel like the universities are doing a great job at introducing that and making that more local and community. So perhaps the universities could start outreach projects through, maybe get funding through these rural areas to help these high school students emerging into adulthood acceptance before they go, because sometimes they get afraid or they're worried. And I think the acknowledgement and,
Mhm.
beforehand through these universities, or perhaps high schools and colleges, could work together on providing knowledge.
Knowledge, yes.
Yeah.
I think college is a crash course. You get a crash course in being exposed to different cultures.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, and that's where I began to see the positive turning point in my identity as an Asian woman, as in college.
As far as some local activities, several years ago, my mom and I would go to the Asian Festival, and I think that was hosted at the Mosaic Church here in Little Rock. And that in itself was eye-opening, amazing, wonderful, just being able to see all the different Asian cultures. And I don't know if they're still doing that. When post-pandemic or pandemic ends, but that's something that I have been a part of.
Okay.
Okay, so as far as I was gonna piggyback off of what you said about America as a melting pot. So I feel like the American culture doesn't necessarily care about some issues until they're made to care, until it affects them, until it affects someone close to home. And so I think President Biden's new bill is a great step, but I feel like majority won't care until they're made to care.
What do you think about that, Joe?
Interesting.
I think she's right, you know what I'm saying? Because you can see so many things going on in this country now, and it's just like being overlooked. But when it hits home, then they start paying attention.
It's definitely nothing new. I mean, this is
it's nothing new. No.
Yeah.
Interesting. With the exception, we've been talking about history, and history has made its way into the news and recent headlines. With the exception of the bombing of Hiroshima, there's not a lot of history about Asians in our history books. As a matter of fact, it seems non-existent. Light has been shed in the past by George Takei, who played Mr. Sulu on the long-running science fiction television series Star Trek. Mr. Takei wrote about his experience in the novel They Called Us Enemy, about his childhood years in the American concentration camp in McGee, Arkansas during World War II. This was a very dark time in American history. What are some historical facts or even people that you feel should be included in the American history books, Arkansas history or American history, that children should read and study and know about?
I'm sure there's probably some if we dug.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that That's why we're not able to answer this question, because we're not taught those things. Those are some things that need to be incorporated into the education system. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people that need to be included that have made a profound impact on the community, especially in Arkansas. But knowing, having that history, especially in school, and being taught that, not just the white racial group. I don't know. You know what I mean?
I'm sure there are some Asian people who fought for civil rights, or who spoke up for. Who fought for civil rights, who spoke up, or who did a lot of things for the community at large. I'm sure I guess it's just a matter of finding them and acknowledging them.
Yeah, and giving them the confidence and encouragement enough to speak up on what
Empowerment.
they've done. I mean, a lot of them maybe are afraid to speak up or share their experience because of.
That's the way I feel.
The death of George Floyd. We're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd's death, sparked what is known as the largest civil rights movement in the world. Protests were documented in every country. What do you think it was that made the cry for justice so remarkable that it crossed racial lines, it crossed global lines, it sparked global outcry? So anyone like to, Juliana, or anyone like to chime in?
I'll just start off with, we're tired of the hate. We're tired of the mistreatments of our brothers and our sisters. And to be able to see George Floyd die, it was just awful, unspeakable, and totally over the top. And we are tired of the hate. We are tired of the racism. We're exhausted, and quite frankly, we're ready to change systemic racism. We're ready to, we're just tired. That's all I can say right now.
To say that I'm tired says a lot. When you get tired, I think you're ready for change. And one thing I've noticed about the younger generation, that they have you all been really going to bat, like with a lot of the issues, been really getting out and being vocal. So it's just really amazing to me, the passion for this generation, even more than 50 years after Dr. King. So this is one more question along those lines. How do you all feel about race relations 50 years after Dr. King has passed? We see another generation, young people like you and Rosa, who have taken on the torch and who are out speaking up. So we look at also Mayor Yee's generation. Do you see, how do you all feel about the race relations today? Look, even 50 years after Dr. King has passed, are we doing, how are we doing? And this is just broad overall.
Tiffany, in my generation, after Dr. Martin King's speech, I think we have moved forward towards racism totally, because after his speech, I see more bonding between the whites and blacks and Chinese in the cultures it's not like it used to be in the 60s or 50s when there's so much hatred and crime toward each other. I think after Dr. Martin Luther King's speech, we have come together. It's like his dream says, that my child would then go to school with your child. We would come together as a family, as a group in America, not just as one private, culture in this community. I think it has come a long way.
Well, I think that we are certainly progressing and have pretty quickly in a short amount of time. like we said before, racism and discrimination is still present and will probably always be present in some levels based on different people's. But I've seen, and so I worked before my current job, I worked in retail for about 5 or 6 years. And this might sound really weird when I say it, but it's something that I've noticed. And when you say race relations, I immediately think of intercultural relationships and how growing up, that was, even for me, almost frowned upon, but not really totally dismissive or dismissed, but frowned upon. But now I've seen through my years of watching people in retail, customers and people, when you're there all day and watching people, I've noticed even now from when I've started 5-6 years ago that I see more and more and more intercultural relationships. And I get so happy when I see those and they're comfortable and they're together and seem happy and not afraid. And that makes me happy. And I've noticed that recently that there's been, I don't know, I just noticed these kinds of things and I've noticed a lot more. So I don't know.
I think it's more accepted.
Yeah, it's more accepted.
I would also say with our generation, 50 years forward, we are very much a call out culture these days. So I don't know, I wasn't alive in the 60s, but I don't know as far as the call out culture back then, but we are loud and unapologetic right now these days. And we want the legislators to hear us. We want change. We want systemic change. And I feel like they could be kind of slow to respond. I was talking to my mom about racism. She was born in 1950. And so she grew up and watched as it was happening. And it's been a slow progression. It has progressed, but it's going to be slow. But I feel as if with our generation, how loud we are and how we won't back down, and we're going to speak up, we're going to call out, we're going to educate, we're going to empower and try to take it to the legislature. I don't feel as if it'll be as slow of a change, but it's going to be slow. It's going to be gradual. So that's something that I feel is different than what it was like 50 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, our generation now is less suppressed and more open to speaking up. And
Tiffany.
Yes, sir.
You're talking about Martin Luther King. Back in those days, if an Asian did not marry Asian and marry Caucasian, that was unacceptable. And, until the next generation came around, well, now, like my mother, for a long time, would not accept, her granddaughter's, husband because he was white. She would not accept it. And then she came to realize after years, hey, this generation is moving forward. You accept who they love, who they are, not because they're not Asian, it's because who they are.
As long as they're happy and being treated right.
It's just like, for years, Chinese people did not accept that at all. And I thought it was really strange because I said, that's who you love. You accept him for the person he is, not because of his color, and that was always stuck in the Chinese community for a long time until really it just, I guess, generation after generation, when it started happening more, well, it was no big deal. It was no big deal, So I'm very grateful for that because I was really uncomfortable when my niece or somebody in our family got married to Caucasian. And my mother and dad said, son, we're not going to sit there. I'm like, mother, why? I never grew up like that, so I didn't saw that side of it, you know what I'm saying? But I'm glad today that it's totally different generation, you know.
Amazing. And I can understand the parallels between Dr. King and also what Julie is saying, the slow progress, because the little progress that we have today, just think Dr. King started more than 50 years ago. So, and it was change that he believed in and that he kept fighting for and eventually died for, but he never got to see it during his lifetime. So
No,
those are changes that we're walking in now,
that's right.
that he worked for. So one thing about history is the work that we do today, may we may not even get to see it. Other generations may reap those benefits from the seeds that we sow, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
the seeds have to be sown, so it has to start somewhere. So just the changes that we see, just think, Mayor Yee, the work that you've done, the your legacy there, the seeds that you've planted, therefore for other leaders, for other young people to see. And then Julie and Rosa, the work that you all are doing, it's amazing. It's something that it's going to set the tone for future generations, for future leaders. And so with that, I'd like to thank everyone for attending this crucial community conversation. It has been eye-opening. It has been amazing. And I'd like to revisit with you again in the future. And so I'd like to thank our guests today, the Honorable Mayor Joe Dan Yee, Lake Village, and also our young leaders, Miss Juliana Grantham and Rosa Bost. Thank you again for tuning in with us. We'll see you back here on Zoom in the future for another exciting edition of Crucial Community Conversations. Thank you so much again to Mr. Deshaun Scarborough, Executive Director of the Arkansas Martin Luther King Jr. Commission, which is a division of the Arkansas Department of Education. As always, we leave you with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, which says, "I've decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear." Thank you again. Have a great day.